You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Opperman, and I'll be your host for this version of Dairy Voice, a podcast produced by Dairy Business News. Someday, eventually, in most of the U.S., it's going to green up and start looking like spring, and that means that hay and forage making season won't be far behind. Now, there are many aspects to making good quality forage and getting it stored properly so that it eventually ends up in front of some sort of animal in a feed bunk or a bale carrier or whatever it might be. Today, we're going to talk about some of the tips and processes involved with getting hay growing in the field, getting it harvested, and getting it stored. And here to tell us more is Bart Elder with Vermeer. Welcome, Bart.
Good afternoon.
To get started, Bart, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Vermeer?
I've been with Vermeer for about 21 years, and been most of my time spent with the sales side, traveling different territories across the Midwest. Spent a little time in our parts center, and some time in product development, which was really fun. Getting to work on really closely with our round baler group, part of just one of our recent launches.
Let's start the conversation at the beginning. So let's say if I'm a dairy producer or a rancher or whatever, and I'm looking out over my field of alfalfa, how do I decide which fields I'm going to keep and harvest this summer and which ones that I'm going to turn around to something else?
It's good time, obviously, to get out there as alfalfa is growing and just evaluate what those field stands look like. You know, we've been pretty fortunate, Mike, the last few years of not as much winter kill. You know, I think last winter, when it did get cold, we had some snow cover on the ground, and for sure in the Midwest, we did not have as much snow this year, but it got cold. And that can get pretty hard on alfalfa stands, especially if you didn't have enough regrowth from last fall in some of those areas. You definitely want to get out there and look at those stands and see if it's going to make it through the rest of the season.
We talk about winter kill a little bit. If I've got hay ground that's on a hill or flat, does it make much difference? Like snow cover and so forth. Does there make much difference on the topography of the land, what winter kill looks like?
Oh, it certainly can. Like I say, snow has really helps some of that winter killer, but ice can hurt it, some of those things. And obviously, if the sun hits it pretty quick and melts off that ice, that can definitely help alfalfa stands. But it's usually pretty hardy. But it also, you just have to determine, how long have you had it in production? It's not going to last forever. And
Right.
It gets to be a point when, maybe those first cuttings are pretty productive. But if it looks like this, second and thirds, and especially if it's going to be marginal on moisture, producers may want to consider maybe taking the first cutting off and planting something else in there and then get that back into a rotation of some sort.
What about from a fertility standpoint? What do we need to do? Cuttings ready, and then how do we carry that out through the summer?
Yeah, Mike, especially in the Midwest here, we really concentrate on our row crop ground, and we do a really good job of taking soil samples and monitoring what that soil needs. But sometimes we forget about our hay fields, and it's just as important to get out there, get those soil samples done, add whatever they may need, lime or whatever. Sometimes we forget to do those things, but it's just as important to have that plan and with your agronomist. Some people really take that first cutting off and then they'll apply that fertilizer. It's what I do on my own. It just seems like the first cutting, you're always going to get a decent amount of tonnage and then really concentrate on the next two or three. But yeah, get that plan with your agronomist set up and really see what that soil and that crop needs.
So now that I've got kind of a plan for my fields, let's turn to equipment a little bit. So my equipment's been sitting in my shed for the last 6 months. And what do I need to do to get it ready, evaluate if I need something new, or where do I go from here?
It's been a long time since a lot of our producers have ran that equipment, and you maybe didn't exactly remember what was wrong when you put it away last fall. You'll get reminded once you get in the field with it probably, but it's definitely a good idea to do some preseason work on that equipment, even if it has been stored properly. Hopefully you cleaned it up last fall, may or may not have greased it, but let's just focus on balers first. Get that baler out of the shed. Make sure that you hook up the monitor too. We kind of just assume because it was working last fall that it's going to be working this spring. Sometimes those monitors don't always get stored like they should be. They get left in the tractor cab, or they don't get put somewhere, and they can be affected by cold weather as well. So we want to make sure that everything's working, and you never know what visited that baler through the winter while it was sitting in your shed. Might have been some rodents. They love to make nests in there and mess with wiring. It makes a good nest, I guess. So the we want to make sure that that's working. Get it greased. Make sure that you're doing the annual. There's lubrication points that are annual on a baler. Just really check over the belts, chains, and sprockets for sure. We don't want the Typically, we don't like to see a chain that's stretched more than 3%. That way, that chain is cheaper than a chain and a sprocket if we let that go too long. Get it out of the shed and run it. You want to simulate belt tension on there, so you always want to crack the tailgate open and be in a safe position and operate that baler and make sure that everything's working like it should.
I know that when I was a kid, I was the bail monitor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember what having a monitor in the cab was like. Now that everything's set up, the big question comes, okay, when do I get in the field? When do I take that first cut? And what do I do with it once I've got it harvested?
Weather always has a big answer on when we decide to get into the field. But certainly in these alfalfa fields, once you start to see that crop just start to bloom, that's kind of your optimum protein levels that we're shooting for. That first cutting always gets a little taller, a little stemmier, so we definitely don't want to get late on it if we can help it. You'll see a lot of producers that will chop or put that up into baleage, and I prefer most baleage on that first cutting because I know that I can put it up in a couple days. Again, with that crop being maybe just a little stimmier, you're going to have a better quality product if we can do it that way. And then I know I'm right on line for that next 28 or 32-day cutting that we want to achieve.
Yeah, because that first cutting really, timing of it really sets up to your whole summer, right?
Yeah, if you get late, you're just trying to wait. Oh, I'm trying to wait for that 3-day dry window. Sometimes in May can be really challenging,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I prefer. You can usually get a 2-day window and get that hay cut and go ahead and put it up wet and get it wrapped. Definitely important to make sure that we're getting plenty of wrap on that bale. You never want to skimp on wrap in the spring because it's got to go through the summertime of heating a lot more than in the fall. We maybe get by. I don't like to skimp on plastic, but definitely need to make sure that we're getting that product sealed up right because it's going to be a long time till we feed it from May. Typically, it might be November or December till we get a chance to feed it.
So talk a little bit more about wrapping and baleage. So you talked a while back about how we store it and
hmm
directional and so forth, which I thought was interesting.
Sometimes we store it in the field, which is the most convenient for us or the producer, and that isn't always the best. Especially if you're putting wrapping with a inline wrapper, storing that row north to south is really crucial. And the reason, Mike, is that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? We're kind of getting that sunshine distributed throughout the day on both sides of the bale. If that line is facing east to west when that sun hits it from the south all day, we're just really, really creating heat on the one side and never really getting rid of it. Just something to think about. Always want to
Mm-hmm.
think about that the water can run away from it, not into it. Is important. I drive around the country and I see hay stacked under a tree, and that's never really good either because it gets rained on. It's still getting shaded, so it's not drying properly, and So storage is something that I think we take for granted sometimes. We're going to end up with a much higher quality product if we just think about it ahead of time.
So switch gears a little bit. Tell me what's new with Vermeer and what can, dairy farmers be looking forward to at their dealerships this spring and summer?
We just launched last fall two key products for the dairy market. We re-entered the mower conditioner market, which if you remember back in, I think it was the tornado we had in 2018 destroyed a lot of our production capacity, and it was one of the products we had to give up on just short term. So glad we've got that back in our lineup. So 4 models, steel roller, rubber roller as well in that mower conditioner lineup that I know that our dairy producers appreciate. The other product is our Generation 4 Pro baler, which is our true silage baler. This is a product that obviously replaces the Gen 3, but it's a product we build in Pella, Iowa, a 17 knife baler that really goes out and makes a tremendous heavy tight bale. We know that that's the key to making high quality baleage is a very dense bale that gets the oxygen out of there, so we keep that bale from heating and just improves overall quality. Really excited about that baler, getting it out to our customers this year.
I think we've got it pretty well set from understanding what to do in the fields, getting that first cut off, some of the equipment needs that we have, and some of the new things coming down the pipe. Is there anything we missed that we need to add in before we sign off?
Vermeer is we've really expanded our overall product line in the last few years and this year as well. We added the mixer line back in 2019 with a purchase there of a very reputable company. This spring, we've just launched a brand new line of manure spreaders. So we're from start to finish, I guess, of,
Right.
of everything. Look to us this fall because we've got some more products that we're getting ready to launch that are really going to benefit the dairy producers. So really excited about where Vermeer stands today.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Bart.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Once again, this has been Mike Opperman for DairyVoice from Dairy Business News.